Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Blockheads Community Videos. My name is Dorian Crutcher. I'm here with my editor Chad Lamon and Zane from SHIP. Is that the organization's proper name? So make sure I have that right.
Ships.
Ships?
I like to say it with a lot of enthusiasm and then jazz hands at the same time.
Ships.
Ships. I love that. And yeah, we were very excited to have Zane with us. He's working on something really cool that I'm really excited to get you guys started with. So Zane, do you want to tell us about yourself and tell us what you're working on?
Cool. So my name is Zane Starr. I'm the founder of Ships. I've been sort of primarily working on ships for about maybe the past 4 months, from sort of idea genesis. And then previous to this, I was working on a decentralized package manager called Cardi that I kind of spun up. And then I started thinking I need an incentive layer for the package manager. And then that kind of snowballed into Ships. Additionally, I am currently jamming on building a multi-token standard for Near. So think along the lines of ERC 1155. So like video games. So how do you batch requests with fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens? And so we have a little bit of a working group going back and forth. I would encourage everyone that's interested to go to gov.near and join that discussion. We really want to hear from the entire community. And so, yeah. I would say those are kind of the two primary things that I'm up to. It's as things come up, do a little bit of this and then do a little bit of that.
Yeah, I had no idea you were in the
keep writing that stuff.
I had no idea you were involved with the multi-token standard. That's really cool. And wait, so you've been working did you discover Near like 4 months ago, or how did you get involved with Near protocol?
So I got involved with Near while I was looking for a home for ships. So I could either build ships on Ethereum. I could try and do something with on Arweave. I could go for Algorand. I could literally, the sky's the limit. So I started evaluating blockchains again. And then I realized Near. And I was oh, I really enjoyed the tech stack of Near and the sort of developer focused mission of Near. So I was I think Near makes a lot of sense. And so I actually reached out to my friend Mally, who's I think working on DevRel at Near. I was hey, look, I have this idea. What do you think about this? And she said, this sounds like a good idea for the grant program. And so I then applied to the grant program and things kind of went from there. But I would say prior to that, back in 2017, before Near launched, I actually went to a talk in Oakland by Alex. And so that was kind of my first introduction to Near a couple of years ago.
Oh, that's cool. Wait, I'm actually live in Oakland. So that's where I am right now.
Oh, cool. I am no longer in Oakland. I was in Oakland and then I moved from Oakland. I'm now in LA. So.
Oh, cool.
There you go.
That's closer where Chad is actually.
Oh, cool.
And just a quick background, what got you involved with blockchain in the first place?
Okay, so maybe it was 4 years ago, maybe 5. I was kind of just freelancing and deciding to go independent. And my friend had quit his job and had started going independent as well. And we're oh, maybe we could do something together. Well, what kind of technology is out there? What do we feel like going? What would be an interesting direction? Is it are we thinking more along the lines of AI, machine learning, that kind of stack? There's blockchain. Let's go back into programming languages or something like that. So we're just kind of playing around with all these ideas, and then blockchain seemed to be the next sort of step, the next frontier of what was new. And so my friend actually joined the Consensus Academy, and I just missed the deadline, but then I was just jamming on it on my own anyways. And so about a year later, he ended up joining Consensus and was hey, you want to go and like jam on this project with me at Consensus? And so I joined the Solarius project, which was like building decentralized science fiction uh, platform.
Cool.
And so,
Decentralized science fiction. Sorry, did I hear right?
yeah, so decentralized science fiction. The premise was, how do we build like an open IP collaborative story or collaborative universe? So imagine if the Marvel universe were all open IP, and the stories and arcs and narratives that became officially like canon were made through the community efforts. So like you would vote on this through the community discovered rules. You have this kind of DAO. And then the arcs and stories and characters that got voted in were then able to be tied to like monetary compensation based on like how the story evolved. So let's say like Spider-Man gets in a car wreck and then like gets oozed or doused with super toxic ooze that causes him to like glow green for some sort of weird reason. And like the universe really loves this arc, so they stake on it, they vote on it, and that becomes like canon. And so now within the official narrative, there is like this green character. Someone comes along and makes a comic book with this green character Spider-Man that has to like degreen himself. And that becomes super popular, and that sells like, I don't know, 500 digital issues. That person that came up with that arc gets some sort of contribution for that. And so it's kind of figuring out how you can incentivize artists to give up or relinquish the IP that they have for their particular narrative, and say, what happens when you let this out into the commons and into the wild, and how do you find additional revenue streams through like an open narrative?
It's like, it's incentivizing people to add on to the story, and it's kind of like a build. It's like a build a story, build a path type of a program.
Yeah, so it's all of that sort of combined in one on steroids. And then the like sort of thing with like fan fiction is like fan fiction may never become like official narrative. But in this universe, it's cool because you can have forks of stories, right? So let's say you don't really like that green Spider-Man like narrative. You could just say, well, I'm just going to build off of this fork of this, and it may not be official canon, but there's no reason why some later date that like fork, that alternate universe doesn't become its own sort of mainstay of like funding and like sort of excitement.
That's actually pretty exciting for me. I'm like I'm like a huge Marvel fan, so like Spider-Man, Miles Morales, like that was I think it's my last costume actually for Halloween.
Oh, cool.
So that was no, that's awesome. And actually, like like the community-driven aspect, is that like Ships is focused on like community incentive, like a community incentive program, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So like I'll just like talk a little bit about Ships too. So that way everyone knows. All right, so like the way I see Ships is basically a new way to sort of sustain open source. Like developers and contributors and maintainers and just like people in general need like sort of incentives to like provide support, be that fiscal, be that time, be that like energy, be that like care for like the project, etc. Just general love. And so the way it works is that we're giving developers a way to build a token economy around open source, which hasn't really been done. So developers will mint release tokens. So a release token is a fungible token that's tied to a feature release for the software. So the way that works is it's not a semantic release. So it could be like near client 1.0, 1.1.1, 1.1.1.2. Those would not get like necessarily release tokens. Instead, it's up to the developer to decide what feature sets that they'd like to bundle together as being a release. So you might say at the beginning of the project, and Q1, I'm going to have a release, and here are the tokens that correspond to this. And this could be something like edgy hedgehog or something like that, or breezy badger, like to just take some like sort of Ubuntu names. So like it kind of just decouples that and says like incrementally, I'm going to be releasing some software. And like I'm going to bundle up all of these like incremental releases into this one mega release. And here are the tokens that correspond to that. And so by giving the developers these abilities to submit these tokens, we're basically saying like, oh, you can use these tokens to incentivize people to purchase them for support. And you can then take that and give these tokens to long-term contributors, or to people that update your README, or people that provide knowledge and knowledge bases. So you can imagine a sort of incentivized Stack Overflow for your project. So there are a plethora of ways in which the token economy can really like drive sustainability and maintenance and contributor ownership into a project. So, all right, to bounce back and quickly step through the flow, you're a developer, you made a release token, some months go by, people are purchasing them, they're selling them, they're trading them amongst each other. At the end of the release, there's so many different people that now hold these tokens. And so what they can do with these tokens is they can exchange them for the revenue that was put into the contract for purchasing the tokens. And at the end of this like sort of sealed release, the developers mint a NFT that is cumulative of the release. It's representative of like sort of ownership of the release. So the idea behind that is that imagine how cool it would be to own Apache 2.0 version 1.0. And so the number of these like sort of sub release tokens that you own correspond to your probability of receiving the NFT.
Okay, so like wait, so a few things.
That was a lot.
No, that's what I was like writing it down. Okay, so what we can do with these tokens, like you know, when you're actually like tokenizing an open source project, is like one like send them, or like I don't know if pay is the right word. Is pay the right word here? Like if you want to pay like a you know, a long-time developer, long-time builder on this open source project to work on this issue or work on this fix? Like, is that like an example of like what you can do with the tokens? Like, as like one use case?
Yeah, you could do that. I would say that like the thinking around that is just that like pretty much so any set of tasks are available to you. You could potentially almost like Craigslist at your task rabbit. So I think there are a lot of developer issues that are around like what seem like to the person that's working on the software trivial issues. Like, oh, I wanted to use this tool that you had with React.js, and I'm not 100% sure how to do that. Can someone help me with this issue? And so like those kinds of requests are like a little bit harder to answer. And so like you might say like, oh, okay, I'm the person that doesn't really know how to do this on this project. I will get some release tokens and then just post this up as like an ask. And then anyone in the community can then ask, and you as like say the core contributor could then like either validate that answer and validate that. So if, like the result of that could get slashed or not slashed, which is like kind of an interesting way to like allow the community to participate in the economic incentives at large. And so one of the things I found talking to developers is that feature requests for issues on bounties tend to be a little bit more nuanced and complicated. And the reason for that is that the internals as like why this feature could or could not work becomes a little bit hard. And so there's a lot of talk about ways in which to make that better, or like ownership or forks, and like how to sort of maintain that. But yes, so long answer short, the sky's the limit on what you can put out.
I'm kind of curious on how it gets initiated. Like, so I have a new episode to say, starting it's like new open source, decentralized application, and like, what does the process look like from start to finish for this new project? Like,
Okay.
where does the first like token come from?
Okay, the first token. Okay, so you sign up for the ships, and you log in. You either link your GitHub account or you don't. But because you're trying to talk about your own project, you link your GitHub account. And so within that, we're actually going to just soft onboard projects. So like your first 3 projects that you release are free, and like we'll subsidize that through sort of sponsored accounts or meta transactions through you. So the user then has a command line interface program called Ship CLI. And what they can do is then tie that into their integration or their build step, or just manually run it. And that will deploy a project multi-token standard contract. And so what that does is then allow you to then set the distribution curve for the tokens, which is kind of off in the details. And then it allows you to sort of set how you want contributors to be compensated. So you could set things where like you want to be able to say like who gets what, or you want it to be on like the lines of code that are edited, or you want it to be uniform. It doesn't really matter if you made a contribution in this, it's uniformly distributed. And you as like the creator could take a larger cut of the pool, and like the social norms around that dictate like what is possible for you or what is possible for your community. Because it's like if you're not a nice person and you say, oh, I'll take all 99% of the tokens, you get nothing, then you're really not incentivizing the community to like contribute.
Right.
Otherwise, like you're incentivizing community to contribute. So it's just like you don't really always need barriers. You can also rely on just humanity. It's like there's this analogy that someone like makes about security. I think Bruce Schneider is like when you go to a restaurant, you don't think that like someone is just like everyone is out to get you and poison you in the restaurant. You assume that like social norms, they're highly incentivized to not poison you in the restaurant. They just are. And that sort of sense, I think the barriers in terms of like fairness for the project, as long as you do something that's reasonable as a default, either like uniform distribution or like number of commits and like during that release, then I think you're fine. Okay, so you set up the initial parameters of the contract, which are like the initial pool, like maybe how much you get initially allocated, and like any sort of contribution pool that you want. It's deployed. You go to the ship's website, you see a link for your project. The CLI just kind of handles a lot of the bootstrapping of that, which is like the registration to either the ship's protocol contract, which is like another thing altogether, the SHBS token, which is more for like governance and like does some things around like fees, but we'll get to that. And then you are able to sort of go off to the races. You can then link to that on like GitHub, where users can then like purchase tokens. And some of this is still like sort of being figured out, which is the kind of interesting thing about release tokens is that they have a limited time scope. So they're not forever tokens, which we believe means that you can just like purchase them with a credit card, much like an NFT, without being a security. So because they are like sort of time bounded. And so there's no like improvement that can happen incrementally over that particular period of time through like particular management. So, okay, we were at the point of where you've like deployed it. It's available. You now have a shield that you can put on your GitHub page. Now someone can either click on that shield and it gets taken you to the ship's gold page, where you can then either purchase tokens, you can earn token rewards. So like the sort of login flow is to do this kind of progressive login. So you don't need any crypto to then participate. We'll do like a sort of burner wallet. I think Matt Lockyer has done a lot of like sort of spiking ahead and like proof of concepts of like how this like should work or could work. And so we're just kind of taking that on board. That and the universal login work that Alex Van Zant did on Ethereum, which is like, how do we use meta transactions and these kind of logins to just like really make a seamless login. And so like the kind of vibe of ships is that contributing should be fun, engaging with open source projects should be fun, and like you should really just be enjoying yourself as you're going through the process of either like contributing to earn some sort of reward, or just contributing because you love the project, or contributing because you're speculating and you think that, oh, a lot of people are going to need support for, let's say, Babel.js, and like a premium support ticket is going to be worth so much more because, so let me buy a bunch of these tokens and hold on to them, and at the end redeem them for more than what I paid, which would be like, you know, that sort of DeFi, like, oh, I'm sort of a financer, I'm an investor, and I think that this is going to be a valuable project, and so how do I generate more funds for the open source? Okay. So like you can kind of do all these things through the portal, and like the idea behind Ship's Gold is that eventually everything will be more like sort of decentralized in terms of like data storage, etc. And we're trying to have as open a platform as possible. So that would mean like when we build a knowledge base, or when we have questions and answers, or like little surveys that developers can then reward people for answering. We will tie this into IPFS and open data stores. So Ships doesn't actually have to be the portal where people interact with like the Ships contract. It just happens to be the first one. And like, it doesn't even necessarily have to be the best one. As long as we make the platform for people to be able to build on top of it in a way that's like useful to them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the whole workflow. And then the part that's also important is when you seal the release. So in the beginning, you may say that 4 weeks out, I'd like to set the schedule. And like this part is still a little bit fuzzy. So you can say like, my release is going to be from the start of this month till the end of next month. And so, okay, that's the schedule that you've set. You maybe have this block number or this timestamp, boom. Okay, and so people know that the tokens that you're offering are good for this particular time period for all these support tickets. And so this kind of gives you this incremental, don't stash your tokens. You gotta use them. So like what you wanna drive people towards is like being an active participant in the open source, because like 91% of all like commercial projects rely on dead open source projects. So, and then you have to kind of look at why is that? Because there's nothing that you're really doing to like engage with it potentially. Like maintenance, there's no incentive for you, even as like, let's say you're a core contributor, you got bored of this project, which does happen. People do get burned out. There's no incentive for the community that's relying on it to like continue to support it. But if you have a lot of people that are like relying on this project and you think that it can be like valuable to you to answer questions about it, then you'll continue to do that. And then you've got this whole snowball effect where the project is no longer just stale, and you as the core contributor can then like delegate and say like, oh yeah, this person now has permissions to do X, Y, or Z. And if you feel like you're entitled to some sort of cut of that, then like you can like bake that in. It's really up to you. And like, you know, if you want to be more benevolent, then you can always say like, hey, look, instead of me being like the sort of owner of this, let's point this at a DAO, which is something that we'd like to build in. But in the beginning, you can only do so much. So pick and choose your battles. But yeah, so it's like building this community-driven, open source, like token economy where all of the economics of open source are available to developers. We set up the token contract, we minted the tokens. There are people that are buying and selling these things. They're enjoying the process, they're answering questions, they're building a knowledge base. All of this is open source. It's all in an open database. Anyone can like read it and like generally have fun with it. Okay, we've come to the end of the time period. The release is now sealed. You hold 5 tokens. Chad holds 5 tokens. I hold 10 tokens. And like in between there, we've answered a lot of questions about how ships works, like what to do in the case if you wanted to build your own front end on top of ships. All of this is in this public like database. Everyone's happy. Everything's cool. We're like stoked. In the release, there are 500 near into the pot. So you are entitled to 25% of that. And Chad, you're entitled to 25% of that. And I'm entitled to 50% of that revenue. Okay, so that's great. We're all locked in. We've made, what is that? 500. You've made 125 near. Chad's made 125 near. And I've made 250 near. What a great time to be in open source software. Okay, cool. So like that's not the end of our story. So now at the end of the sealed process, we hold this lotto and you are eligible for, you have a 25% chance of winning the NFT that represents sort of all the value that people put into the ecosystem. So in a way, it's worth the 500 near market cap because that's like what you had to pay to play in this ecosystem. So now we spend the Russian roulette of the near randomness protocol, and one of us wins the NFT. We'll say Chad wins the NFT. Yes. So now he has this NFT that represents version 1.0 of the ship's website. And he can sell that on an exchange, or he can trade it. He can do whatever he wants to. So like, and that way you've kind of built this real momentum around like, even if you don't want to speculate on like what's going to happen and you're just a contributor, and even if there's not, let's say, a lot of money floating through, you're able to say like, hey, look, would it be cool to think that this project is going to be Apache 2.0 and own this NFT? There's only one of that you can't own except through like sort of participation in this like ecosystem. So it kind of drives these incentives towards contributing, maintaining, funding, just like saying, yes, let's do more of this to like this open source project. So that's kind of the end of the life cycle. And then you say, all right, let's do this all over again. I think in 2 months, we're going to be ready for another like sort of release. We'll bundle everything up and voila, we're off to the races again. And so the people that like maybe have outstanding support tickets will then need to like re-up. So there's like this kind of weird time scarcity like dynamic to it, in the sense that like, oh, there's like a limit and like there's a hotness to the tokens. Yeah. So that's kind of ships. And there's a lot of broader things in the background, but that's like more longer term vision.
That's awesome. That was an amazing overview. Thank you.
A lot of words. I got to be a little bit more concise.
No, but I mean, like, it gave us like the full picture of it. Like, it definitely gave us like the full like flow and overview of it. Yeah, I was like, yeah, definitely. I was like reading about it. I was like wondering like what was the medium or like what was like the flow of it. Like, so it starts on GitHub. Like you have your GitHub project. You have the shield button. and the button takes you to like this portal that like lets you essentially like distribute and like set up the details of like of how the tokenomics will work for this particular project, and like or token economy will work for this particular project. And I mean, it sounds really cool. It almost kind of sounds like essentially like users, in the right format, they say if for like freelancers or something can kind of just like make their own like little earnings or like living off of it. I don't know if it's like recommended, not recommending anything, but
Yeah, totally. So like the idea is like, I guess what I was doing when I was kind of like putting together a pitch deck and things like this, I was looking at sort of where things are going. So look into the future. Right? And so like it's kind of interesting to think that even amongst like say like Gen Yers who've been in the workforce for a long time, like the retention rate is something like 2 years, and like Google hires more people that are like freelancers and contractors than they do employees. So I think that like job mobility is like really on the rise, and it's really hard to be sort of sticky at one location for a long time. And so when you start to think about what that means for like code projects, it means that a lot of your knowledge share is like highly mobile and like moving around. So when you see that happen, you have to start thinking like, well, how do we build the right incentives to where like if you leave the place that you're working at, you could still like continue to earn like money? Or if you are like freelancing, there's not really a lot of change into like your own economics, right? You have a way of doing this kind of smoothing through just like doing the things that you already love, which is like contributing to these projects. So like the aim would be to make it such that like saying that you are a full-time open source like developer could mean that you contribute to 5-10 projects. And that is like a viable way to actually make money. It would also be interesting, I think, when you look at the broader economics of like open source. So when you look at people that are like doing recruiting, you look at like knowledge bases, and then you look at services, and then you look at like hosting. These are all like things that like tend to be insular to like projects when they get big enough to sort of sustain like their open source. They end up going into these like sort of enterprise verticals that then have like lock-in for their particular like project. Whereas that's actually kind of harder to build, I think. I think if you can build the economics into like the process to where someone else can feel like they are enabled to be a service provider, and that you as the genesis of the project could say like, oh, I would like to take some sort of like a tribute for that,
Yeah.
then that becomes like possible for you to like sort of monetize on the open source without doing all of the heavy lifting of being the core service provider, like Babel.js, for instance, which is like quite sad. They have 3 core contributors that can't get funded. And like Babel.js is like super popular.
Yeah,
Millions of developers use it. It is in critical pipelines, and like they can't get funded. But I think also part of that is just thinking about it from the terms of like projects that don't have a lot of contributors, that have a lot of like people that could contribute. Like there's a problem there. And so the question is like, how do you build the infrastructure for the like sort of emerging economy? And that means figuring out pathways to get people engaged with your project, and then to sort of improve like the knowledge share. So like one of those things I've been like spitballing with a lot of different people that are working on like sort of core like projects like Web3 and things is like, well, what does a sort of mentorship project look like? And like some of the projects I've talked to have been talking about, it'd be kind of nice to have an intern. And then, so is there a way to tie that into the whole economic structure? So like, sometimes if you're going to work on a, let's say, TensorFlow, it is such a large project and so involved that like someone giving you a quick lay of the land and walkthrough is incredibly valuable to your ability to then make a meaningful contribution to that open source. So
Game changer.
yeah, right. So you got to really chisel at it from all directions to like build the infrastructure. So like I guess really Ships is kind of like the infrastructure for sustainable open source. That's the idea. So sustainability means like I think maintainability, fundability, and like openness.
It's perfect.
It's funny. I usually ask people like how they reach the kind of like the Web 2.0 space with their projects, like in terms of non crypto native people. But I feel like I mean I don't know. I feel like most of like we're talking about is already pretty like like easy to grasp in terms of the concept. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on like reaching kind of like the not crypto native people or developers?
Yeah. So like that's like my target, really.
Yeah, it's like it sounds like it's like exactly who you're trying to reach.
Yeah, the non-crypto native developers. So like one of the positions that I'm like sort of experimenting with is like saying like, okay, you know about sponsorship, and sponsorship is great. And like, why not try like tokens as well? And like, we're going to try and make this onboarding process. So like, your first 3 projects, and then like maybe your first 10 releases after that are like subsidized, they're free, get good and comfortable with it, feel good about it. And we're going to try and make a really nice experience for people that are like sponsors, because like that's kind of like the gateway drug to it, because you have like npm fund, and then you have like open collective, but I think like open collective is a little bit like tricky to manage, and then you have patreon where like people are kind of doing these things. So like I think the bridge is kind of there. And then like one of those other things that to experiment with, like in terms of outreach, is like making that experience awesome and like making your tokens useful. So let's say that you don't have anyone that's like funding like anything. How can we make sort of a swag store for your project? And just say like, okay, we're just going to subsidize a little swag store. Do you need like stickers or something that's like sustainable in some sort of way? Maybe that's like some sort of weird rebate, but like something you can use these tokens for to get people excited about the possibilities. Because like tokens can really be used for a lot of different things. Like they can be used for reputational staking. They can be used for like liquidity pools. They can be used for like financing. And especially when you start to talk about like future expected cash flows. A long time ago, I used to be in fintech. So it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like there's just like so many possibilities that you can't get from a single one-time use donation. And so I think the key is making it fun and then immediately making the tokens useful. So I donated $5 for 10 tokens. And now I've spent 2 of these tokens on some stickers. Well, that's something I couldn't have done with the donation. That's something. And then you can also say like this, I put 5 more of these tokens in a pool together that was earning interest from me staking this. And so I've been earning more tokens just by like taking these tokens off the market. And so now I can get the 100 token hat. Oh, well, that's something I couldn't have done before. That's interesting. And so like all of a sudden you've got people that are getting that sort of like Nintendo Mario level 1, world 1, game 1. There's only a Goomba that's running around on the ground. You don't have the turtle, and they did that on purpose because like you just want to intuitively start to navigate this world. Right. So the more you can make your product and onboarding like that, then like I think you're going to be able to reach those developers just because it's fun.
The more turtles, the more Goombas you can add.
Yeah, right.
That's so cool. Chad, did you have any questions?
Yeah, like say for your bounties, because I'm not like I'm new to crypto and I'm new to like I don't code at all either. So like, but I understand IPFS and open source and things of that nature and like liquidity pools and all that jazz because they're just talked about so much and everyone's doing it. It's the thing to do. So I'm curious like what maybe bounties you would have for like sponsors or for people that aren't say savvy with coding or anything.
So, like, sponsors are really kind of an interesting one. I'll tackle like corporate sponsors first.
Okay.
So, like, so tokens give you this really interesting property. So, normally, I think that if you are like sort of a corporate sponsor, you end up having to deal with like say one person and or one group of people, and like let's say Open Collective, you're dealing with that particular collective. And it's like, okay, well, this is who I invoice, etc. With a sort of token sponsorship, you could just buy a lot of tokens and then let the natural distribution of contributors be rewarded. So it's a way to really fund or jumpstart an ecosystem. If you're contributing $5,000 every month and these sort of release tokens, you're just buying them, then hell yeah, I want to get in on like that. I want to be one of those developers that's like, getting this payout,
Yep.
which is like way more difficult and tricky to do if you're just donating directly. So I think corporate sponsorship has the incentive to do it. Probably the largest tricky thing is navigating tax law. So European tax law is the trickiest thing. So like I have some thoughts about that is not coming from like a like actual legal hat. So I've got to actually talk to some people about like what would be sort of legal. So in Europe, they have these VAT taxes that make it impossible. Well, not impossible, that make it tricky for donations. So I think GitHub sponsors does not track the country of origin for the donation. And so because of that, if you are, let's say, like I think if you're like a German citizen, I'm just relaying this information when I was talking to like a European like sort of startup, GitHub, like open source project. And they were saying that they knew of a project that could not withdraw like $50,000 worth of donations because it didn't have country of origin tax information, which then made it impossible for them to receive that. So like with tokens, it's kind of interesting and different because a token is not money. It is also not an equity. It is some sort of weird utility thing. Mm-hmm. So because of that, I think that the exit gates for figuring out your tax situation can then be offloaded to the exchange, maybe not necessarily the direct contributor. So like that becomes like sort of an interesting thing that like, you can like use. A lot of people use Open Collective in Europe because they're better at tracking donations and like doing that sort of fiscal tax management side of things. Okay. So that was like the corporate side. And I think the non-technical contributors, I'm also very excited about because let's say like in terms of like designers, a lot of people need like design. And then a lot of people also need community management. So what would be really kind of cool is like thinking about hooks that you can put into like sort of GitHub or questions where you can sponsor people to like answer questions to basically be support. So one of these ideas I've been playing around with is chatbot sort of concepts. So normally for like other things, we have these like friendly and sometimes not so helpful, and sometimes extremely helpful, like the DMV I don't know if you know this, in California DMV, there's a secret hidden special feature where you say request to speak to an agent. Nowhere is that in the chat menu, but it is there in experimental.
Yeah.
And in 10 minutes, they'll put you in a queue and then you're chatting with an actual person at the DMV. Super pleasant. Super pleasant. Highly recommend.
Writing that one down.
The same when you like call them too. If you just say, "Can I talk to an associate?" and it'll route you. It's great.
Right. So like imagine that for your project, and imagine you as like say a non-technical person that wants to be able to be sort of the front line of support. You can like totally do that. And like you can set it up so that way like you are rewarded for every sort of question that you answer, or every response in which like the user gives you a check mark for adequate response. And so like you can kind of get in on these incentives. And then there's also just like all kinds of other contributions to open source. And then there's also surveys. So here's the thing that I've been thinking about a lot. As developers, we often just need to ask people, real humans, questions. And so it's nice to be able to go to a project and say like, hey, I have this question. Can someone here in the community answer this for me? And like put some sort of incentive behind that. So it's like, oh yeah, I can earn something for doing this. So like GitHub discussions just dropped. And like one of the interesting like sort of statistics about that is like, they saw a 69% 56-day retention rate from people that interacted with discussions. So moral of the story is people feel more connected when they can have a conversation or contribute in ways that are not just code. So like you should like try and incentivize that and like try and get, this sort of real sense of like you doing this action with regards to this project is like a valuable part of this community.
Mm-hmm. So they get like talking points or something for their talking point meter would go up for how many conversations and people they chat with or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's like an interesting thing where like you can imagine like I like time as a vector feature for like tokens that I feel like are like not so like exploited. So like you could even say like, oh, for the talking points feature, if you were spamming and saying like first 1 billion times, then maybe like to earn is really hard and to lose is like really like strong. And maybe you can have downvotes for the downvotes. I don't know. Reputation is like a really long thing, but like with tokens, that road for experimentation is there. And I think the opportunities for like non-code contributions are really exciting.
Yeah, I think that'd be something that could be really cool because I see like a lot of DAOs and stuff, but they're all mainly for their bounties are mainly code-based bounties. So, I'm thinking maybe on like the media side of things for you, like kind of like what I do for Near, I'll do like video editing and content producing because, while everyone's on the ground making these amazing applications, someone needs to be there to help display these amazing things and push it out on social media that everyone's on their phones, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. So I think that could be a great opening it up kind of to other creative people that are also independent contractors that are looking for something, like this. Like I know a lot of videographers and photographers or musicians that would, definitely like to get in on it. They would just need to, find a way how they could help contribute.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like, yeah, I take notes all the time. So like, I definitely like wrote it down. I was like, oh yeah, video and like media content production and like things like that from even like newsletter, like production and like copywriting and like all of the things that really make your project shine and like really feel like, a company. Like a real like production of it. Like we can do it. We can do it. It's just like you need to have I think we're technologically advanced enough now to like where this distributed working model can work. I mean, we've been in a pandemic for like the past almost 2 years if you've been in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
So,
Can confirm.
so like, you know, it's like, yeah, we're definitely capable of remote work and being effective at it. Yeah, and so this just makes me want to like surface this like a lot more and like have a category that's like specific for um, non-code contributions that are valuable.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, as soon as you get that up, I'll be in there.
Thanks. I will definitely post that for Ships itself.
Yeah, first video you want, I'll help you out with that. That'll be
Oh,
fun.
thank you.
I'll be able to contribute, and I'll get some coins too. That'll be
for sure. Yeah, and then you can participate in the economic incentives, which would be awesome. Which like kind of takes me back to this other thing. So I've been like super like mute about this, which not out of intention. It's just like a lot of different moving parts. So I've been focused on the individual project level, and so you got to ask yourself, well, like open source is about sustainability. Like, how does this make money? How do you like fund this? Does it make money? And like, I think the bottom line is yes, it does make money. And I think the thing that I like to think about is ecological design. So you think about ecological systems, how they sustain itself, you know, and you need different types of actors in it in order to like really have a nice biome or biodome, depends on where you are. But like, yeah. So like, okay, so we have these release tokens, and then we have the ship's protocol token. The protocol token is really about like governance. So one of the things when we talk about like donations and things like that are fees. So there is a withdrawal fee. At the moment, I think the target is between 3 and 5% for every withdrawal. So you're never feed on the transactions themselves, only when you go to like convert that into like near, or you go to withdraw these tokens. Yep.
Yeah.
So where does that 5% fee go? That goes to the ship's protocol token holders. So for that,
oh, that's pretty cool.
For SEC regulations, you cannot really have anyone like purchase that over an exchange like Coinbase, not until there's a diverse enough group of like holders. Mm-hmm. So over time, someone would be able to say, I like what Ships is doing. I want to like fund that. And so the thinking is that projects that contribute a lot of value to Ships will get rewarded and Ships tokens. And some of those Ships tokens will actually be what I'm coining colored tokens. And so what these colored tokens or these color token like coins do is that they're a temporary token to the Ships protocol. Let's say the three of us are Ships protocol holders. There are like 10 projects. These are all getting redeemed. Of those 5% fees, the amount that we receive is proportional to the amount of tokens that like we've staked. So that's pretty much so the long and short of it. And so we're playing around with the idea between like a deflationary economic system or something that's more inflationary, that's like a little bit bounded. And so that's a little bit tricky. And we haven't really like settled on like exactly what to do there, which is probably going to be like a fixed token release schedule.
Okay.
But okay, so that aside of that part of the token economics, what does it do and how does it work? So you have these Ships protocol tokens, you're staked in, you're receiving rewards. This is great. And let's say that you created a super popular project. Awesome. And let's say that you've contributed to, like, I don't know, 20% of all of the Ships protocol token rewards. Well, you're going to get rewarded Ships protocol tokens, which means that you're now tapped into the larger ecosystem's like value creation process as a project contributor. In addition to that, you may get like 2x that amount and temporary like these like color tokens that have this temporal like time boundedness to it. So what these coins do is like you spend them, and when you spend them, they're burnt. So you can only stake them for a time period that's fixed. So that might be like 10 reward periods. And so what this allows you to do is in an economic downturn for your specific project, you can then smooth out the earnings by saying like, oh, well, right now I need like more funding. I can then funnel more money into the project through these ships protocol like colored tokens. Boom. And so that doesn't affect the long-term economics of the ship's protocol tokens because they're all burned up after this particular period. But it does allow you to tap into larger rewards. So in a time period of, say, rampant speculation, you can say, oh, cool, I've been storing up these like temporary tokens. And then I can then try to think of like a better name for these coins. And so it's like a colored node in a graph like that, but then it's just not very marketable to me. I'm going to go for something else. I'm thinking about it as I'm saying it. I was like, okay, I need something like with Cheetos or something that just like has like a snap to it. So anyways, you've got these like hot potato coins. And these like hot potato coins like are gonna get like burnt up, or we'll call them burnable tokens, like temporary time burnable tokens. Okay, I'm getting hung up. And so like you're able to then tap into the larger ship's protocol rewards, and like so you're getting this revenue stream that's larger than your own project for this like temporary period of time that may like stabilize the project. Maybe you don't want to do another release for a time period. And so like you're able to just bring in more revenue like ad hoc or at sort of will compared to like the market. So it could be something like chatbots were really the hot thing of like 2017 per se. And then like by 2018, a lot of players were out of the space. And that's just because like funding was a little bit more scarce. And so maybe what you wanted to do was the new like video mimicry chatbots or something like that. So you need some time to like fund that particular development. You have all of these like temporary revenue coins. So you can then just like spend those. And then all of a sudden you're tapped into this other revenue stream to like sort of float the boat while you're doing this other research and development. So there's this weird kind of cool, interesting thing that you can do with tokens that you can't do with like traditional sponsorship, like revenues, like smoothing and things like that, that like allow you to really participate in like all of ships. So like from the like protocol side, you can earn rewards for like governance and things like that, and working on like protocol things where you just earn like ship tokens. And then you can also like earn these kind of rewards for like having a baller project and like really generating a lot of the activity and excitement on the coin, on the project.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome. Zane, thank you so much for your time. And like I actually want to ask like, how can the community get involved with like, your project if you're looking for more resources, or there's just looking for wanting people to jump in and get involved with your project? Where can they go, or how can they get with you?
They can go to HTTPS ships gold ships.gold. So there's a lot of like plays on the word that it's the ships gold. It's ships gold. It ships gold. Shit's gold, so to speak, if I can say that on this. But yeah, it's fun. I would go there and sign up for the beta. And so the beta hasn't been released yet, and there's nothing you can do on the platform, but the beta is coming and it's going to be really awesome. You're going to be able to use the website and like the front end and play with like the ship's website interaction. So you get a feel for how the tokens work, etc. and then we'll do sort of a larger launch and release. And if there are token rewards that are rewarded in that particular silo on, say, testnet, then we'll like migrate those over. And so it should be like a real fun time, and it's going to be a great way to like participate in the conversations around what are the defaults, how does the protocol work in the beginning, what are the fees, and just still like be an active member of the community. Other than that, we have a Discord, which is accessible if you sign up for the beta. So go to the beta and then you can like join the Discord. Right now it's pretty quiet, but that's kind of by design because we haven't really talked about ships outside of sort of a group of developers and projects and open source projects directly. But there will be a few articles coming out about ships that really drive excitement and drive more activity in Discord to discuss. I actually like a little bit of a longer form discussion too, and something that's a little bit more permanent. So there will be like a forum of some sort as well for discussion, but not yet. So right now, sign up for Ships Gold, and then like all of that will just kind of drip out over time.
Okay.
Awesome.
So they go to ships.gold.
Ships.gold.
Ships.gold
looks really good too.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
I like how big it is, and it just kind of everything's like very easy to read and just like really pops out at you. I really enjoyed going through it the other day.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I have an awesome designer. So she's like done a great job there.
Shout out to the designer.
It helps.
No, it definitely looks good. And like, yeah, and again, it's like, so you sign through ships.gold going through the app beta. And that's for like both like, you know, developers and like, you know, people who are actually making the open source projects here, right? Just like anybody can sign up through the beta.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say just like, I don't hesitate anyone to either like email Zane at ships.gold or info@ships.gold. Both of those are like fantastic. I'm super responsive and curious to hear like what people think. So never hesitate to like drop me a line or a hint. And like, I want to talk to you as a developer out there because like, this is who I'm trying to build the tool for. So if it doesn't work for you, I have a problem.
No,
well, not everybody, but you know, there's people that don't work. But like, I'm talking to you, and you're watching this, so you're awesome. And I already know that you're my people.
Thank you so much, Zane. And we're gonna put all this in the all this information in the description below. So definitely check out, reach out to Zane, go to ships.gold, get involved, and start building your open source community, tokenized community. Thank you again for your time, Zane. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It was great talking with you all.
It's our pleasure.